We're going to tackle one of the trickier subjects in biblical studies, these alleged contradictions. Our mission, really, is to get a handle on how scholars figure out what's a genuine conflict versus, maybe something complementary.
Right. And to do that well, we need some clear terms right up front. There are basically three kinds of textual tension we look for. First, there's what we'd call a true contradiction. That's when you have two statements that they logically can't both be true.
Like what? Give us an example.
Like one passage suggesting the earth lasts forever and another predicting a definitive end of the world. Mutually exclusive.
Got it. Okay, so what's the second type?
That would be a discrepancy. This is usually a much smaller thing. Often it's numerical. Think of the book of Ezra, where the total count of, say, temple vessels returned from exile might not exactly match the sum if you add up the itemized list right there in the text.
Or more like a footnote issue, not a major theological problem.
Exactly. It's a variation, maybe a scribal thing, but not a core conflict.
Yeah. And the third?
The third is often the most interesting theologically. The paradox. This looks like a contradiction on the surface, but it's actually pointing towards a deeper, necessary truth that holds both sides in tension.
Like the classic example of God's total sovereignty versus, our genuine human freedom and responsibility.
Precisely. It's not meant to be solved by picking one side, but understood as a complex truth.
Okay, so contradiction, discrepancy, paradox.
Yeah.
But how someone interprets these really hinges on their starting point, doesn't it? Their overall view of the Bible's authority.
Absolutely. This is where that methodological split comes in the difference between holding to infallibility versus inerrancy. It changes everything.
Explain that difference for us.
Sure. Infallibility generally means the Bible is completely trustworthy for faith and practice. It won't fail you in what it teaches about salvation and how to live. But proponents might allow for minor errors in history or science that don't affect those core truths.
Whereas inerrancy?
Inerrancy takes it a step further. It asserts the Bible is free from error in everything it teaches or touches on history, science, geography, you name it.
Which means, if you hold to inerrancy, you have to find a way to harmonize every single apparent variance, right? No discrepancies allowed.
That's the implication. It often requires some very complex scholarly work to reconcile the texts.
Okay, let's make this concrete. Let's talk about Genesis and the two creation accounts.
Yeah.
Genesis 1, that's the big cosmic 6-day structure, very formal. God speaks, things happen, man and woman created together at the end.
Right, that's often attributed to the priestly source. Very ordered, transcendent God. Then you flip the page to Genesis 2, the Yahweh source, and it feels completely different, much more intimate, earthy.
Yeah, God is forming man from dust, breathing life into him, and the sequence is different. Man first, then plants, then animals, and then woman.
So the clear tension is there. The question is why? If editors or redactors put these side by side, why not smooth it out? Make one consistent story.
What's the scholarly thinking on that?
Well, the widely held view is that the redactors intentionally kept both because they teach complementary truths about God. Genesis 1 gives you God the transcendent creator, the sovereign architect. Genesis 2 gives you God the immanent, personal, relational life giver. You need both pictures. The theological depth was valued over simple, linear chronology.
That makes sense for narrative. But what about when the tension involves, hard historical data we can check? This brings us to that famous sticking point. The census in Luke chapter 2.
Yes, the Quirinius census. This is definitely a challenge, particularly for a strict inerrantist reading. Luke connects Jesus' birth to a census under Quirinius, but Jesus' birth is generally dated before 4 BC, when Herod the Great died.
Right. And the main well-documented census under Quirinius, when he was governor of Syria, wasn't until AD 6. That's a 10-year gap.
It's a significant gap. So how do you reconcile it if you believe Luke is historically accurate in every detail?
Requires some serious digging, I imagine.
It does. The harmonization involves a couple of, quite technical arguments. First, a linguistic approach. Some argue the Greek word protos in Luke 2.2 shouldn't be translated first census, but rather the census before Quirinius was governor.
Okay, so reinterpreting the timing based on the Greek. What else?
Second, a historical argument. It proposes Quirinius might have served an earlier role in the region, perhaps as a special military or administrative official, a procurator maybe, and oversaw an earlier, less famous census or registration before his well-known governorship in AD 6.
Is there any evidence for that earlier role or census?
There's some suggestive, though not definitive, evidence. Some Roman papyri and inscriptions hint at complexities in Roman administration and that people were sometimes required to return to their ancestral homes for registrations. It's complex historical detective work.
Wow. Okay, the level of detail needed there really highlights our challenge. Let's switch gears to doctrine. Paul versus James on faith and works. This one comes up all the time.
It sure does. Paul, especially in Ephesians 2, clearly says salvation is by grace through faith, not as a result of works.
But then James comes along and says faith without works is dead, and even a person is justified by works and not by faith alone. Seems like a head-on collision.
It does seem that way, but the key is understanding they might be using the terms works and justified slightly differently because they're addressing different problems.
How so?
Paul is fighting against legalism, the idea that you can earn your salvation by following the law, by your own efforts. He stresses that the basis or cause of salvation is faith alone, received as a gift.
Okay, so Paul's focus is on the root of salvation. What about James?
James seems to be addressing a different issue. People claiming to have faith but showing no evidence of it in their lives. Like just saying, I believe intellectually, but it doesn't change anything. For James, works are the necessary evidence or fruit of genuine living faith. If there are no works, no life change, then the faith professed is probably just empty talk or dead.
So it's a paradox resolved by seeing they're addressing different aspects. Paul on the cause, James on the evidence. True faith results in works.
That's the standard reconciliation, yes. True, saving faith inevitably produces good works. They aren't the condition for salvation, but they are the consequence of it.
So wrapping this up, what's the big picture for you listening to this? These variances, whether narrative, historical, or doctrinal, they tell a story about the Bible itself.
They really do. They reflect its complex history, different sources being woven together, editorial choices being made over time, and they often show a preference for presenting complementary truths rather than just a single, flat perspective.
And the key takeaway seems to be that how serious you judge an apparent contradiction really depends on the lens you bring.
Exactly. If you start with a commitment to strict inerrancy, you'll need these very specialized, sometimes intricate defenses, like we saw with the census argument involving Greek nuances and obscure Roman records.
Which leads to our final provocative thought for you to chew on. The sheer complexity required to defend certain historical points, relying on deep dives into ancient languages or fragments of papyri, things most everyday readers would never encounter. Maybe that complexity itself tells us something. It suggests the original tension or discrepancy in the text was significant enough that it needed that kind of expert-level defense later on. It really highlights the challenge these ancient texts can pose when we try to read them simply.